Hi everybody, this is Mrs. Malloy, and this is lecture number 1 for Southeast Asia, the geography of Southeast Asia and early life of Southeast Asia, and it corresponds to pages 249 to 262 of your textbook. Alright, well, Southeast Asia's geography and location have impacted its varied civilizations. Throughout history, its waterways have served as highways for both trade and travel. Southeast Asia is geographically characterized primarily by two ways of life: mountain life and sea life. You see, many people in Southeast Asia, almost half actually, have very little or no contact with the ocean due to the geography of their individual nations. People live either in the mountain regions or along the coasts. This has led to some very distinct and unique cultures developing in the region over time, and we're going to discuss these types of things today. Alright, well, let's talk first about mainland Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is made up of an archipelago-based island region, as well as a mainland area that is part of the Asian continent. This mainland area is between the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean. There are 5 nations of Southeast Asia located on this mainland peninsula, including Myanmar, which is a country formerly called Burma. Ever hear of Burmese pythons? Yeah, from that area. And the other 4 nations include Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. We're going to focus quite a bit on Cambodia over the next few weeks when we watch The Killing Fields, a movie about the communist takeover of Cambodia during the mid-1970s that led to a genocide. Cambodia was known as Kampuchea from 1975 to 1979, but it is now referred to as Cambodia again. We're also going to talk quite a bit about Vietnam and its role during the Cold War period because of the proxy war, called the Vietnam War, that was fought there during the late 1960s through the early 1970s. Alright, well, most of mainland Southeast Asia is covered by mountains and plateaus, which separate the region from mainland Asia. Throughout history, this has served as a barrier to cultural diffusion. And this is very similar to what we've been talking about or learning about in India and how the Himalayan range prevented Indian and Chinese cultures from interacting. Each nation in mainland Southeast Asia has a unique culture, due in part to the separation of various countries by the mountains and plateaus. This is similar to how the Deccan Plateau divides the Indian subcontinent, leading to the emergence of very different cultures and languages in northern and southern India. However, despite the barrier effect of Southeast Asia's geography, there have been invasions throughout history, as well as a great deal of trade. So geography can hinder cultural diffusion, but it doesn't entirely prevent this spread of culture or prevent contact. So keep that in mind. Well, Southeast Asia is a fantastic example of all of this. Like most early civilizations, those in Southeast Asia emerged along rivers and river valleys. In Southeast Asia, these include the Irrawaddy River in Myanmar, and it also includes the Salween, which is another prominent river that flows through Myanmar as well. The Chao Phraya River, another important river in Southeast Asia, flows primarily through what we call Thailand. An important river that flows through Cambodia and Vietnam is the Mekong River, or the Mekong River. Mainland Southeast Asia's 5th river is the Red River, and this originates in China and then flows through Vietnam, where it empties into the Gulf of Tonkin. All of these rivers help irrigate fertile farmland. We know from Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel video that in order to support a large population, a region must have a crop that can be widely produced in a fertile place. Well, Southeast Asia has been able to support a large population throughout history by growing rice. Southeast Asia actually produces about 1/3 of the world's rice today. Pretty cool, huh? All right, well, in contrast to the mainland peninsula, Southeast Asia is also composed of many, many islands. The islands of Southeast Asia are scattered throughout thousands of miles of ocean. There were many small island nations and 5 major countries that make up island Southeast Asia. The major nations include Malaysia, Brunei, Singapore, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Both Indonesia and the Philippines are archipelago island nations, meaning they are each made up of a number of islands. Indonesia is made up of over 13,500 islands. Holy cow! I mean, can you imagine trying to memorize all of those? I wonder if school kids in Indonesia are required to memorize some of these. That's not an intimidating assignment or anything. Wow. Well, we've already learned that Japan is also an archipelago nation, but I don't think they have 13,500 islands, right? Well, the Philippines, another archipelago nation in Southeast Asia, they have more than 7,000 islands. So yeah, the Philippines has more than 7,000 islands. Now, if you listen closely, you might think that I made a grammatical mistake there. I said that the Philippines has, not the Philippines have, and that's because the Philippines is singular, although it refers to many islands. It's one country. So no mistake there, people, although it's very easy to make that mistake. It does sound strange, though, I agree. All right, well, some of the nations that make up Southeast Asia are actually part of other larger islands, and even mainland Southeast Asia. For instance, part of Malaysia is located on the Malay Peninsula, which stretches out from the mainland Asian peninsula, and it's surrounded on one side by the Gulf of Thailand and then also the Strait of Malacca. Well, Southeast Asia is also located along the Ring of Fire, and it is prone to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The volcanic eruptions over thousands of years have all contributed to fertile soil in the region. However, seismic activity in the region also makes Southeast Asia prone to tsunamis. On December 26, 2004, an earthquake off the coast of the Indonesian island of Sumatra resulted in a massive tsunami throughout and along Asian and African coasts, as far away as Sri Lanka and Somalia. The tsunami resulted in mass devastation and hundreds of thousands of deaths. In terms of volcanic activity, Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines is one of the most active volcanoes in Southeast Asia, and the world for that matter. A huge eruption in 1991 killed hundreds and destroyed many villages. Eruptions of volcanoes in Indonesia as recently as 2013 have led to the evacuations of many of the islands and have actually hindered air travel in the region because of all of the dust and debris. All right, well, let's talk a little bit now about the climate of Southeast Asia. Most of Southeast Asia lies in the tropics with hot and humid weather. Southeast Asia also experiences monsoons, just like India, resulting in a rainy season from June to September. Monsoons are seasonal winds that result in varying weather patterns. When the monsoons come from the South Seas, they bring rainy weather, and when the winds reverse direction later in the year, there's a dry season. These wind patterns contributed to the development of sea technology, namely sailing technology, throughout Southeast Asia. A great example of this was the lateen sail. This technology later spread to the Middle East and was used by Arab sailors. Farmers in Southeast Asia heavily depend on the monsoons for crop irrigation, which means watering of their crops. Just as we learned during our India unit, delay of these monsoons can mean the delay of water, resulting in drought-like conditions. Too much rain can also result in crop failures. Because so many people are farmers in Southeast Asia, their livelihoods often depend on the weather. Southeast Asia is also prone to typhoons, which are powerful tropical storms. The people in low-lying regions in Southeast Asia are often prone to the high winds and flooding caused by typhoons. This is similar to Bangladesh in South Asia, remember? And a recent typhoon in November 2013, Typhoon Haiyan, which occurred in the Philippines, resulted in mass devastation. All right, let's talk a little bit about the natural resources found in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia provides the world with about half of its tin supply. It's also rich in metals such as aluminum and nickel. Nations in Southeast Asia, like Brunei and Indonesia, are rich in natural gas and oil. We will see that these resources were of great interest to the Japanese leading up to and during World War II. Remember when they were really militaristic? Yeah. Well, much of Southeast Asia's minerals are exported to other nations, even today. Southeast Asia has had many important resources, Southeast Asia has many other important resources, including rice. It also produces a number of cash crops. See, much of Southeast Asia was colonized by European nations during the age of new imperialism during the mid-1800s. European nations set up plantations to produce cash crops like coffee, tea, coconuts, and spices. In fact, many of the world's spices come from the island nations of Southeast Asia. Ever hear of the brand Spice Islands? Yeah, well, the Spice Islands, this is the term that we use to describe all those islands of Southeast Asia, most notably those of Indonesia. Ever had vanilla? Yeah, it comes from there. Other cash crops in Southeast Asia include rubber. Today, Southeast Asia has managed to not be so heavily dependent on these cash crops as other former European colonies in places like Africa and South America. As mentioned before, Southeast Asia is primarily a tropical region. Hence, they have many tropical rainforests that, all of these contribute to the region's long list of natural resources, namely here, lumber. Many of these tropical rainforests contain mahogany and teak, which are prized by Western nations for furniture production. The demand for teak and mahogany by other nations has resulted in the destruction of much of the rainforest. This creates a difficult choice for Southeast Asians: cut down the forest for income or destroy the environment. All right, well, Southeast Asia is also a very diverse region. Southeast Asia has a diverse ethnic population, due largely to the geographic separation throughout the region. Laos, located on mainland Southeast Asia, is a very mountainous place and is a great example of diversity. There are various regions in Laos that are cut off from one another. Today, they have many ethnic backgrounds and languages, including a group of people who are known as the Laos people. Okay, and just so you know, people who live in Laos today are known as Laotian. Okay, they're the Laotian people, but the Laotian people are made up of many different ethnic groups. One of which is Laos. Okay, there's also the Thai group of people, the Hmong people, the Yao, the Mon, and the Khmer people. Laos also has Chinese and Vietnamese minority groups. Because the Lao people make up most of the population, about 48%, they actually control the government and have decided on the official language, which is Laotian. This has resulted in nationalistic tendencies from each of these other groups. Another example of ethnic diversity in Southeast Asia is Malaysia, which is made up of Asian people from a variety of places, including Chinese and Indian. With so many different ethnic groups, Southeast Asian nations have struggled throughout history to create a unified place, or they've struggled to create unified nations. All right, thanks for listening. This was the end of part 1 for lecture number 1. Thanks. Bye.